But those are very good token representations. But what I'd like to see is policies that enable all people to have more opportunities. Largely African Americans in Michigan and in Grand Rapids are working class people. So I'd like to see them represent their interests just as much as we represent the corporate interests, and talk about their interests and take their interests into consideration.
Well, there's going to be, there are a couple of political hot potatoes,
Sure.
as you put it, that are on the table right now. As a matter of fact, one, the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative has filed adequate petitions
Sure.
to get a measure on the November 2006 ballot regarding basically affirmative action.
Right.
It would be taken away from university admissions and state hiring if the initiative is passed. First, your own view on this issue.
Well, there are many complex things about affirmative action. Anybody who's got a mind will say that. However, this piece of legislation, to me, is not about being helpful in the state. It's not about having a discussion. To me, it is about, and I'll use the inflammatory language, it's race baiting. Because overwhelmingly, the beneficiary of affirmative action around the country have not been African Americans per se, but have been women in general, and particularly white women in particular. And it is only fair because white women, black women, all women were excluded from universities for up until the 1960s. And African Americans were excluded from the universities. And none of these people talk about the long legacy of that discrimination. The second thing, I would have more respect for the legislation if these people were coming and said, you know, what we really want to do is change our public school funding. And we want to shape Michigan with a better educational system so that all people can compete. Then it would seem to me that they were genuinely interested in the welfare of the state and all the state's people. But as it stands right now, I think these are nice, well-meaning people who haven't a clue, and they are stirring up a pot or opening up a can of worms that they might want to be more deliberate in helping all of us think through these issues better.
What about the argument that affirmative action has served its purpose? That's a very common vocal argument from the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative.
Well, I mean, it served its purpose for who? I mean, the question is, what was it intended to do? Now, listen, when I was a student at the University of Michigan, there were many kids who got in the University of Michigan on one basis. They were rich and they were white. Nobody is attacking that affirmative action, right? They didn't deserve to be in a grade. So a black kid gets in the University of Michigan who has a slightly less GPA than this kid, and then they're not supposed to be there. It seems to me that I'm in the business of higher education. There are all kinds of reasons people are in school. Some people are tall and they can throw a basket in. Some play the violin. All kinds of reasons. So this legislation is not looking at that and talking about that. It's picking a subgroup, it's picking a fight, and that's what it's doing, and it's riling people up. It seems to me that this legislation is to, and I may be cynical, but to get out a voter base that is already resentful of people who are losing jobs, and to turn that issue and to blame it on other people rather than seeing the systemic problems that are really existing in our state.
All right. Professor Jelks, you made headlines recently with another very, I guess, political hot potato issue right now, which is welfare reform. We saw it at the end of the last legislative session, and somewhat of a heated exchange took place between yourself and one of our representatives. Could you explain, first of all, this plan in the legislature? It would cut people off of welfare after 4 years, as I understand. Right. What is your take on the way it's crafted right now?
First of all, it's it was with Representative Jerry Coyman. My concern was, when I read it in the newspaper, just like everybody else, is that the argument of the legislatures was, as led by Coyman and I think Senator Bill Hardeman, was that this Michigan's legislation needed to come in line with the nation. Well, in fact, Michigan's legislation had already been in line with the nation. That is, that there's 5 years maximum of cash assistance. So they needed to revise this. It seemed to me that, and they knew this last January. My concern was, in correspondence with Representative Coyman, was why didn't you ask your constituents last January about this and talk to people who serve low-income people in the community? Rather than making them a target group, why didn't you ask them and other people who work in welfare what they think about it? It came to the end of the legislative session, and Representative Coyman and some others, and Senator Hardeman tried to sneak a piece of legislation through without doing their homework. And I'm a professor, and I tell my students to do their homework all the time, and the legislature needs to do it, because the bill they were attempting to put through had no budgetary, they said they had no budgetary impact. Well, when we had a meeting and got Coyman there, all these people who work in the front lines of these agencies say, well, if you do this, this is going to be the ripple effect on these programs. Sadly, they hadn't thought about it. That's not the kind of leadership we need. We need leadership that, and these are well-meaning men. I'm not partisan in this. They are well-meaning men, but they didn't do their homework. And what happens in that legislation, and I will say this in this, the Republican Party has had a penchant since Ronald Reagan for attacking the poor. And Ronald Reagan began his famous 1980 campaign talking about the welfare queen in Brooklyn, New York, driving a Cadillac off of welfare money. It both had language of women, gender, it had language of race in it, and I think it's time out for that. And our legislators need to turn their ideology off, get some real hard data, talk to some real hard people, and make good legislation for the poor in our community.
Okay. Well, you're not a legislator, but I mean, that was some strong language against the Republican Party, right?
Well, no, that's factual language. I'm a historian, and anybody want to challenge me on that one, I can document footnote, page, number, and citations.